Top of the morning to you and welcome to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Olumide Macaulay. The headlines. Russia says Ukrainian drone damages building in central Moscow, disrupting air traffic. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky says Kiev has received 2 Iris-T air defense systems from Germany. Plus, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko says Russia achieved its goals in Ukraine. Thank you for joining us. Security and emergency workers are conducting investigations after Russian air defense shot a Ukrainian drone, causing it to smash into a building in central Moscow. Russian officials say this has disrupted air traffic at all the civilian airports of the Russian capital. Emergency workers inspected the damaged roof of a non-residential building which the drone hit, with witnesses in the area describing hearing a powerful explosion. The Russian Defense Ministry and Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin says there were no casualties after air defenses destroyed the drone, which then fell on the Moscow Expo Center complex in the early hours of Friday. The Expo Center is a large spread of exhibition pavilions and multi-purpose halls fewer than 5 kilometers away from the Kremlin. Meanwhile, there has been no immediate comment from Kyiv. A U.S. official says the United States has approved sending F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine from Denmark and the Netherlands to defend against the Russians as soon as pilot training is complete. Secretary of State Antony Blinken sent letters to his Danish and Dutch counterparts, giving assurances that the United States will expedite approval of transfer requests for F-16s to go to Ukraine when the pilots are trained. Denmark and the Netherlands had recently asked for those assurances for the U.S. to approve the transfer of the military jets from its allies to Ukraine. In the meantime, Ukraine has received 2 Iris-T air defense systems from Germany. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky made this known in his regular address. Mr. Zelensky says it's a powerful and much-needed air defense system and thanked the Germans for supplying the weapons. The president also signed a decree on Thursday, formalizing a decision taken last week to fire all heads of regional recruitments to offices after a nationwide investigation turned up scores of cases involving corruption and abuse. Video released by the Ukrainian Presidential Press Service ahead of his evening remarks showed Mr. Zelensky accepting credentials from the ambassadors of 6 countries, including Germany, Indonesia, Sweden, Chile, Peru, and Colombia. The head of the EU's Special Training Command in Germany says Ukraine's requests for the training of its forces for abroad have changed 18 months into the war, with offensive tactics and the education of military leaders now topping the list. Lieutenant General Andreas Marlow explains that at the beginning of the war, Kiev had rather been keen for its troops to be trained in defensive tactics and how to fight in urban areas. Mr. Marlow was speaking at the Cleeds training ground, situated about 100 kilometers west of Berlin, minutes after Ukrainian troops had fired 105mm rounds with Leopard 1 tanks they'd been trained to operate over the past 5 weeks. Muzzle flashes could be seen even before the cracks of the shots were heard, and dust clouds rose where the shells hit their wooden targets on a shooting range marked by the tracks of the tanks that rumbled back and forth through the mud. As part of the EU military mission service, Western troops have trained some 6,200 Ukrainians in Germany this year in a wide range of skills stretching from operating advanced air defense systems such as the Iris-T to driving and firing modern tanks such as the Leopard 2. In contrast to its successor, The Leopard 1 has been around since the 1960s, though the Ukrainians are being supplied with a more advanced version that was standing at the end of the 1980s. The Ukrainian troops training in Accuses are already the fifth rotation since Germany and Denmark announced they will pay the industry to refurbish at least 100 Leopard 1 tanks, some of which have been mothballed for 20 years, to send them to Kiev. A Ukrainian infantry brigade has released combat footage from an embattled village a few kilometers south of Bakhmut. A military spokesperson, Andrei Kovalyev, says on national television that Ukraine continues to conduct offensive actions to the south of Bakhmut. Lyut, Ukrainian for Rage, is one of the new storm brigades under the Interior Ministry Ukraine uses during the counter-offensive against Russian forces. Meanwhile, Ukraine's defense ministry is urging military-age citizens to update their data at army enlistment offices and overcome their fear in a campaign launched on Thursday as a summer counteroffensive grinds through its third month. The Deputy Defense Minister, Hanna Maliya, says the campaign, which draws on slickly produced videos and photo testimonials of prominent soldiers describing their fears, aims to break down a major obstacle in army recruitment. The campaign comes with Ukraine likely facing tougher challenges in recruiting as the war with Russia, now in a brutally attritional phase, nears the 18-month mark. As she outlined the campaign, Maliya was careful to say that not all those who updated their personal data will automatically be mobilized into the army, and that not all those who are mobilized will find themselves in a combat zone. Russia has achieved its aims in Ukraine to date. This is according to the Belarusian president, Alexander Lukashenko, who says he doubts their close ally Moscow will ever give annexed Crimea back to Ukraine. He was speaking in an online interview with Diana Panchenko, a pro-Russian Ukrainian journalist. Lukashenko said he believes Russian President Vladimir Putin had already achieved his goals in what Russia calls its special military operation, and said the two sides should sit at the negotiating table and be ready to discuss all the issues, including the future of Crimea and other Ukrainian territories Moscow claims. He also claimed Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has put a stop to talks between his country and Belarus. Now joining us is Alexei Ishak, head of the sector at the National Institute for Strategic Studies, a governmental research body of Ukraine. Good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning.
Now, it's also a very, very disturbing trend, obviously, that the war continues in spite of all the mediation efforts that have so far not yielded any fruit. And now we're at this stage where Ukraine continues to receive its aid and support from countries such as Germany and this Iris-T air defense system. They've also benefited from the Patriot defense systems given by other nations. Obviously, that's part of the reason that Ukraine has been so resilient, and I believe more than 95% of the missiles shot by Russia have failed. How important do you think is the recent delivery of the air defense systems from Germany, and what does that say of the support from Germany towards Ukraine?
Air defense is very important, and really maybe air defense was the most prominent sign of Western support, because effectiveness was very high initially. But recent months, Russia changed its tactics, and now Russian missiles change the route, flying to targets. So effectiveness now, it's not it was not until recently, for a month maybe, it was not 95%. It was much lower, and that's why Russia was so effective in stopping grain transit from Odessa, because they changed way to hit terminals and to hit infrastructure, grain infrastructure, and now new air defense systems, they allow to make air defense more reliable, and really it's very effective. As to German support, as I understand the situation, Germany, the second largest supplier of help to Ukraine after United States, both in military terms and financial terms and humanitarian terms. And now we have a big discussion in Germany about cruise missiles Taurus. It's possible, and it's very important. It's the same quality as British and French Storm Shadow. This quality of missiles, this is very important for destroying Russian infrastructure on occupied territories. But Germany have this discussion. Previously, regrettably, this project with Leopard 2 was not so effective because it happened, they were not prepared for concrete conditions of war in Ukraine. It was not Germany fault. I believe it's mutual fault, because Ukraine wanted Leopards as soon as possible, and Germany proposed to make some modernization, but it was seen as it better sooner, that of better quality, and now they are not so effective in counter-offensive, and now Ukraine have to change tactics and to make some improvements in Leopard 2, but generally, continuation of German support is very important, and as I said, I believe certainly it's the second largest provider of help to Ukraine after the United States in all terms, in military, financial, and humanitarian.
Mr. Izak, there was a recent story of an account of a young man in his 20s who pretended to be pretended to be a teenager, 18 or 16 years of age, by falsifying some documents because he wanted to dodge the draft. Now we know that men are banned from leaving the country, and the draft age has been revised so that more people can be conscripted into the army. But we understand how difficult it is for a man who has no predisposition to fight towards violence, being afraid of being drafted into the army. That's why Hannah Malia, your, I think, senior official, says that you should not be afraid. Yes. How do you think Ukraine should tackle this issue concerning the fact that Ukraine doesn't have the number that Russia has as far as population goes? And now that the war continues to be protracted, more people need to be drafted into the army. But there's a fear that some are dodging the draft, and some of them are, and that's why the corruption case involving the firing of those officials by your President Zelensky for corruption in helping some Ukrainians to leave the country dodging the draft.
It's a problem without no prompt, clear solution, but the same problem Russia has, the same problem with the conscription and dodging of population from mobilization. But the picture is not like this, that Ukraine does not have enough people in army, and we have somehow to conscript more people. The problem is different. The problem is tiredness of population. This exhaustion of population, this feeling of something that goes too long and is too tiring. Ukraine have almost roughly the same amount of people in the army as Russia now, because Ukraine made a big mobilization in first month of this war, and there were no problems with the mobilization and conscription because a lot of volunteers were ready to serve. And now Ukraine have about 1 million people conscripted and mobilized. Russia maybe have 1 million and 500,000, but maybe 2 million. But Russia has much more territory, and it does not mean that all these troops are in the field. So the problem is not number of people in the army. The problem is there is no rotation in Ukrainian army for all this time, and people who were mobilized and conscripted in first months, they're still in the army, and rules for their mobilizing and leaving service is very strict. So people in the army are tired, and now when there have been made attempt to make some rotation to conscript or mobilize additional people and release servicemen, militaries who are in service for more than a year. It obviously became now a problem because servicing for the army and to be mobilized is not so popular as in first months. So it's internal problem, but I don't think it's the problem comparing to Russia. Russia has the same problems. They are forced to conscript prisoners in a big amount to fight in the battlefield, but they are not effective. Maybe less effective than Ukrainian reserves, and both Ukraine and Russia. We both have not used our reserve. In fact, number of troops that are fighting in the front is maybe 100, 200 troops. And the current game is to exhaust each other, to keep your own reserve and destroy reserve of the other side. So it's not to say the problem of quantities in Russian and Ukrainian and Russian armies. They almost the same in the field. But the problem is rotation and this feeling of tiredness of the population when we need to make some rotation and preparation of more fresh troops.
Indeed, thank you for reminding us that both countries have not used their army reserves. We know that it takes courage to stand a post and hold the weapon and have to fire on another human being. It takes a different sort of bravery for a man to do that. So that war fatigue and exhaustion which you speak of is very understandable because it continues. But Mr. Ishak, it's been 2 weeks since the cluster munitions that were asked of the United States have been delivered. And one of the excuses at that time was that, oh, we need these cluster munitions. As soon as we have them, it's going to dislodge the Russians who have dug in behind their positions where they have mined the front parts of their defensive in the areas they've taken from Ukraine. But it's been about at least 14 days now. Have those cluster munitions been as effective as first considered?
Our military says yes, it's effective, and the plans exist to make delivery of cluster munitions from the United States even bigger. If previously we had cluster munitions just for artillery pieces, and now it might be cluster munitions for HIMARS, much bigger missiles, and it means that using of cluster munitions is considered as effective in breaking through Russian fortification. But I don't think it's the only problem for breaking through this fortification created by Russians in 3 lines during half a year. The short answer, yes, these munitions are effective. It's not so effective to say that it's a game changer. Ukraine reports to United States about using this munition as it was conditioned by deliveries that Ukraine have to report and also fix all places where these munitions are used for future demining. Maybe Ukraine will get more cluster munitions. I'm not sure that it will allow breaking through Russian defenses on Ukrainian occupied territory just for. I don't believe that Ukraine may break through Russian fortification just because of cluster munitions. Some other weapons and tactics are needed, but yes, generally they are effective and reasonably secure for future restoration of territories.
Well, we were under the impression that as soon as those munitions were being used, it would change the temperature and the complexion of the theater of war at the front lines. But let's look at another type of weaponry. This time, the F-16 fighter jets anticipated by the United States, who have now said that they will send to Denmark and the Netherlands as soon as pilot training is complete. It's something that obviously when this does happen, if it does happen, that the war continues to the point that Ukrainians start to use F-16s. Are you worried about the dimension that this war will take if it comes to that, and before that time there's no end to this conflict?
It's not possible that this war of style First World War. Now we have this style of war when there are trenches and there are intense fighting without moving all forces. I don't believe that this state of the war could continue more than several months. Something will be changed. And but yes, the feeling is now that during this month Ukraine will not have F-16s. It seems that it's something for the next year, but it does not mean that the war cannot be fought and Ukraine cannot win without F-16. There are another solutions, and I believe they are now prepared, because Russia also does not use a lot of aviation. They don't use aviation, except helicopters on battlefields. So I don't think, I think the situation is the same as with cluster munition, when some people believe that a new weapon can change the situation drastically and stop the war just now. Yes, it's important, but maybe this war will be fought for several months without intense war. Will be fought without F-16s, and some other weapons will be used in this war.
I do hope to share your optimism that in a few months, as you project, that there'll be some change to this conflict. Thank you so much for your contribution, your insight and information this morning, Mr. Alexei Itzhak, the head of sector at the National Institute for Strategic Studies, governmental research body in Ukraine. Thank you so much for making out the time to be with us. Дякую, Serdashna, дякую.
Дякую вам. Thank you.
Coming up, first ship to use Ukraine's corridor arrives in Istanbul. Details in a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome to the Soul for More stretch of today's special coverage of Russian invasion of Ukraine. The first vessel that used Ukraine's Black Sea corridor crossing through Turkey's Bosphorus Strait has arrived in Istanbul safely today. The Hong Kong-flagged Joseph Schulte container ship that left the Russian-blocked Ukrainian Black Sea port of Odessa earlier this week had been in the port since February the 23rd, 2022. The day before the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Ukraine last week announced a humanitarian corridor in the Black Sea to release cargo ships that have been trapped in its ports after the termination of the main grain export deal last month. Moscow has not indicated whether it will respect the shipping corridor, and shipping and insurance sources have expressed concern about safety. Local broadcasters have said the ship will anchor at the Ambarli port in the south of Istanbul. As 67 leaders from Africa and the Global South prepare to attend the BRICS Africa Summit next week, South African Ambassador to China, Siyabonga Cyprian Suele, has hinted that the meeting will be focused on partnership and multilateralism. The anticipated 15th BRICS Summit is scheduled to hold from August the 22nd to the 24th in South Africa's economic hub of Johannesburg under the theme BRICS and Africa.
We believe we can involve more women. Our peace processes will be more stable. That's why there's so much interest of people who want to join the BRICS because of direct benefits of BRICS. Partnership for development, or partnership for inclusive multilateral. The first thing that we agreed with our BRICS partners for this year's theme, that let's prioritize what we call just energy transition. We're developing countries, the issue of the role of women, particularly in peace processes. We believe we can involve more women. Our peace processes will be more stable. That's why there's so much interest of people who want to join the BRICS because of direct benefits. As you see, the theme we've chosen is an appealing theme. Let's look at key things which we can do as developing countries. When you say partnership, I like to stress that BRICS is a partnership. It's not a bloc. We're not competing with any other blocs. We're a partnership for development. We're a partnership for inclusive multilateralism. The first thing that we agreed with our BRICS partners for this year's theme, that let's prioritize what we call just energy transition. We're developing countries. We're still using quite a lot of fossil fuels, but we're quickly transforming this by adding renewable energies. We're saying we must help the world to recover from the pandemic. We're saying let's talk peace and multilateralism. Let's reform the UN's global governance system, including UN, to be inclusive, and even pushing the issue of the role of women, particularly in peace processes. We believe we can involve more women. Our peace processes will be more stable in the current system. So those are good things which we are saying for the BRICS partners. moving forward. That's why there's so much interest of people who want to join the BRICS because of direct benefits of BRICS.
Therefore, the timing is the 22nd to the 24th of August. The occasion is the 15th BRICS Summit. The people involved are the countries such as South Africa, Russia, Brazil, China. Who better to speak with us about the finer points of this meeting than Channels Television business correspondent Ini John Mekwa, who's with us in the studio this morning. Ini, good morning.
Good morning.
All roads have led to this day.
Yes.
And Russia are not going to have the summit will not have the benefit of the physical presence of Vladimir Putin, who joined them by video link. There was a lot of controversy whether he would be there or not because of the arrest warrant by the ICC concerning the conflict in Ukraine. But when there's talk of such multilateralism, what does that mean?
Well, it means that every country is trying to make the most of their comparative advantage and also get what they can from other countries, because that's what collaboration is about. You bring your strength, I bring my strength, and then we meet together. So in this case now, the members of BRICS, the current members of BRICS, do have a common goal, which is that they would like to see other alternative, of doing business in the world. For instance, why should everybody use the dollar? That's part of what they are looking at. Why should everything be connected to the US or the Western world? Why can't we have our own SWIFT? For instance, why can't we have our own currency? Why do two countries that want to trade with each other, why do they always have to resort to the dollar first, before coming back? I buy the dollar before I now buy your own currency. And, why can't we just trade with our currencies instead of bringing the dollar into it? So this is the binding factor, one of the major binding factors for BRICS. As you mentioned, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Remember, South Africa is the only African country now. But according to them, they have several other countries that have applied to be members, just as we heard there, even before now, we have heard. And you know what?
Would you be aware of the criterion? Is it a geographical consideration or a social,
obviously not. I don't
economic
think
consideration?
More of economic, because if you look at the spread now, where is Brazil? Where is China?
South America,
where is
Asia,
Russia? Where is
Africa.
South Africa?
So global South and global North.
Yeah, so it's more of economical. What can you bring to the table? What are your objectives? What do you want to achieve? If you want to achieve what we want to achieve, then we can work together.
Would Nigeria be a good factor in getting into BRICS?
Well, I don't know, but Nigeria has not even thought about it as it is. But we have to know that if this is pulled into Africa, then, the African countries, it will not just be South Africa. The African countries have to be conscious of what's going on there, what the conversation's about.
If South Africa is a member of BRICS, why not Nigeria?
South Africa's president is the chair of BRICS.
Why aren't other countries such as Egypt or Nigeria seeking membership?
Well, we have our different considerations, I guess. Maybe Nigeria does not have its eyes there. And, they're going at a fast pace. I know that they have started their bank. That's the BRICS Bank, and they're selling bonds at this time. So, Lumide, you can invest if you believe in BRICS. Right. Buy some investments into that, and if it flies, you make your money. So they're going at a fast pace, and next week I know we're going to hear a whole lot of things about trade, about de-dollarizing the economy, global economy. Issues of oil will also come out. As we know, Russia is a major there. But what will really warm my heart is, since Russia is friendly and collaborating with BRICS, it would be nice if we can get an edge to either the Black Sea grain, which will help even the African countries, or better still, get the war off the table. That will be a major achievement of BRICS. By the way, President Xi Jinping has already said he's going to be there physically. Brazil president is going to be. So it's a very big deal, and I think this program is going to focus on it a whole lot next week.
Indeed, they don't have an arrest warrant. hanging over their heads.
Yeah.
So obviously they want to be there.
No, yeah, but I mean, it's a very big deal for them to actually. If you look at the history of President Xi Jinping, he hardly leaves his country, and now he's lifting himself, physical self, down there. That makes it a big deal.
Hooray, I guess. Ukraine grain export. There's a little issue concerning that, if you recall, and we reported today that the ships that are trapped, who obviously cannot trade anymore, but they need to be evacuated from that location, have been granted have been promised rather, a humanitarian corridor by Ukraine. But that's not made in the shade because Russia has essential blockade over that area. So, but where are we with the Ukraine grain export now? Now that it's not happening over the Black Sea, is the land evacuation what's taking place now?
Yeah, well, it's one of it. Remember we talked about how Ukraine has increased its insurance, the insurance funds available, just to encourage more people to, plunge in and take the risk. And
they lose money.
Yes. And earlier this week, we had seen that the Odessa ports had also been used for evacuation, just as an alternative. Hopefully there'll be no attacks, on that. So that's also another alternative which Ukraine is looking to, apart from the land and the rail. And also remember the ports in Poland also, was also offered them to be used as an alternative. So, but I mean, interestingly, they still have some high numbers, Ukraine's grain exports totaled about 3.3 million for the season July to June, last year to this year, So they did some last year, and this year so far, they have exported over 1 million tons in August.
Prior to the expiration of the deal. So looking forward now, it's going to decrease.
No, this is in August. The deal was in July. So you see those alternative routes are still serving some purpose at this point. So, because if in August they were able to do up to 1 million, that goes, I mean, it's not as much as 3 million, which is what we would have expected, all of that in the middle of the war with the Black Sea. But at least you have up to 1 million. And it goes back to the issue of resilience of not just the farmers at this time, but also the government, also the system there that is able to withstand and look for alternatives. And of course, the cooperation of Hungary and those neighboring European countries around Ukraine, because they've offered, their country to be used as a pass-through, to the consumers. And, this is good. But I'm sure that Ukraine will be looking forward to expanding this, because this is still not enough to take care of their revenue, and it's not enough even for the world. We've seen the price of wheat increase, and even other grains, corn and soybeans and all of that, because of the tightening of supply from this.
Indeed. And we await...
And we haven't seen that Russian-free grain yet, though.
I think he gave a timeline to it. I think they say in the future. He didn't say as to exactly when they will donate to the six African countries.
6 African countries for free.
Yes,
maybe after BRICS. Maybe
he didn't give a definitive timeline.
Maybe to be concluded at the BRICS summit. And
possibly.
Since Russia will be well represented there.
And meanwhile, Russia is still getting sanctions left, right, and center. Minimal in some places, far-flung in others. Italy, one of their harsh critics, are halting the golden visa to Russia.
Yeah, well, they're supposed to have done this before now, because the EU had said that should stop. The golden visa actually is investment residency. That's you invest some money and then you'll be giving resident permit, or at some point perhaps citizenship and all of that. So a lot of Russians like to, when they have the money, invest, buy companies, invest in companies, buy real estate, and then they are giving the residents permit, So a lot of the European countries have done that, because EU had already announced about a year ago, after the war and all of that, but Italy is just implementing it here now to say that for Belarus and for Russians, Belarusian and for Russians, that's not open to them anymore. Even though there are talks that in those European countries, after the ban, you still have some of them still accepting. I don't know how that will, maybe under the table and all of that. But, you know, sometimes countries are squeezed. I remember some months ago, we did talk about the UK, you know, in spite of everything, still giving a residency to Russians, and Russians that are regarded
in cases where they're seeking asylum. That could be a factor for consideration, because they wouldn't carte blanche give residency or visas to the average Russian citizen if there's the oligarchs
are the one who can afford it. It's not an average Russian.
Okay.
You know, but now for Italy, officially that road is closed for Russians. They are not supposed to get that, residency permit and all of that.
And for India, they've continued to remain busy. As a matter of fact, now they're asking for discounted grain. Why, pray tell?
Well, I guess...
They can't afford it?
You know, India, they tell you they have a population to feed, so they need everything discounted. And according to them, even the discounted oil is not so discounted anymore, because what they pay for logistics is getting higher because of the sanctions tightening in and all of that. So any insurance company that wants to participate or transact with them charges higher because of the risk of getting sanctioned. And
so grain from whom?
Grain from Russia, grain from Russia. So they're asking that Russia will give them discounts, not just in oil now, but also in grain. So Oliver Twist right there for India.
Asking for more. Well, that's to be expected, you know. So, but looking forward now, we see that these countries have continued to try to hit Russia with these sanctions. How effective do you think these sanctions will be, given the fact that Russia just increases interest rate?
So that's a sign that the sanction is working. That's a sign that the ruble is losing value. That's a sign, I mean, that's a lot of corporates or countries do not want to do business with Russia. And once they don't want to do that, we see even their oil export has dropped, their grain export has dropped. You know, we've talked about how they're looking for alternative, even looking for tourism now, you know, to be able to increase their revenue, looking into the area of other grains. You know, we talked about the poultry and all of that. We talked about that, you know, some weeks ago. So these are signs that the sanctions are biting in, and Russia is looking for ways. I mean, before now, Russia would not even think of hiking its interest rate.
Right.
You know, they won't even be talking about the ruble losing value. But because of all of these sanctions, and you know, this is even in spite of all that they are doing, we must say, I mean, we must give it to them that they're managing the economy really well. When you look for the impact of the sanctions, you don't really see it as much as if it was a country that was not very good in managing its economies. We've talked about how they've had to dip into their government purse to support firms and corporates, to encourage investors, you know, to go into the airspace, you know, to work on their aircraft or their cars, you know, and all of that. So we've seen them try to cover up in the place of ICT, which used to be majorly occupied by the Westerners, Western companies used to be the ones taking care of the ICT and their IT. So the sanctions are biting in. It's just that they're good at packaging it. But when you look in between the lines, you actually see it. I mean, I think the most obvious one is the value of the ruble, which has dropped and has forced them to increase their interest rates.
These are the travails of war.
Travails of war.
So in the meantime, let's keep our diaries open to remember the BRICS Summit 22nd to the 24th.
Starts on Tuesday. Olumide, I'm sure you'll be very busy talking to the South African correspondent right there. I'm sure they'll be filling you in with what's going on there.
Everyone will be interested to see how
I am interested, yes.
Thanks, Ini.
Thank you for having me.
Ini John Mekwa. Coming up on our special coverage of Russian invasion of Ukraine, more after the break. Please stay with us. welcome to the final stretch of today's coverage of Russian invasion of Ukraine. The Russian Defense Ministry says Russia and Chinese Navy ships have been jointly patrolling the Pacific Ocean and holding naval exercises in the East China Sea. A detachment of ships of the Russian Navy and the Chinese People's Liberation Army is currently operating in the waters of the East China Sea, traveling more than 6,400 nautical miles since the start of patrolling, according to the ministry in a statement on the Telegram app. And on the Russian invasion, the Russian Defense Ministry spokesperson Igor Konashenkov says that Russian forces succeeded with an offensive in the Donetsk region. He also said that Ukraine lost 4 Striker armored vehicles. It'll be the first time Russia has claimed to hit U.S.-supplied vehicles. Konashenkov says a Russian missile strike hit and destroyed a Ukrainian train laden with ammunition at Mezora railway station in the Dnipropetrovsk region. Finally, Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko has met Chinese Defense Minister Li Shangfu in Minsk at a meeting on forging closer military ties with China. Earlier this week, both men attended an international conference on security in Moscow, from which Mr. Li warned China's adversaries about playing with fire on the issue of Taiwan. His words echoed previous remarks by other Chinese officials and came amidst Russia's ongoing special military operation as described by it in Ukraine. Earlier, China presented its own plan to end the conflict. President Lukashenko visited Beijing in February and March 2023 to meet Chinese leader Xi Jinping in a bid to promote a strategic partnership between Belarus and China. And that's where we leave it for today's coverage of Russian invasion of Ukraine. Many thanks for watching. I'm Olumide Macaulay. Do have a good day, and please join us again tomorrow.